Ever since the release of the Batman movie, I have been clamoring for more of this fascinating universe. The dark tone, the crime noir aesthetic, the directing, the actors, basically everything in this movie is handled with perfection, and I absolutely love it. But I'm not just here to show more love to this movie. If you really want to see that, just look at my review in the iCard right here. No, today, I want to talk about the future of this universe. I want to dive into the future of the Batman. Hey guys, my name is DJ, and it's no secret that I loved the Batman. For a character that has gotten so many different adaptations over the years, it's exciting to see a film that not only represents the core of this character, but also an entirely different and exciting version of Batman that we haven't seen too much of on the big screen. But the main question on seemingly everyone's minds is, what exactly can they do next with Robert Pattinson? This version of the Batman is so unique that figuring out exactly what to do next with him might be a bit tricky. So today, I have a few ideas that I personally want to see out of the next Batman movie. Some things that I think will not only help progress the story of this character, but also just some stuff that would be fun to see on the big screen. And the first thing that I think could be interesting to see next is the introduction of Robin. Bruce Wayne's entire internal story for the Batman was his very weird relationship with his family. After learning about some of the more questionable choices of his mother and father, Bruce Wayne is forced to change his view on his parents. This charitable and loving duo that he looks fondly on is now presented in a way that questions just how good they really are. His whole view on family is completely askew, to the point where he values Alfred even more than he already does. And while some people might see the sequel as a way for Bruce to question his loyalties to his family even more, a concept that I'll get back to in just a moment, I think the Batman sequel could also take a different approach when it comes to Bruce Wayne and his relationship with family. What if, in the next movie, Bruce decides that his lack of a true family is just too much for him? So he decides to take in and train someone that he knows he can trust. Someone that can become Robin. Now, I'm gonna be transparent here. When I first started thinking about ideas for what they could have in the next movie in this franchise, I instantly rejected the idea of Robin. Like the Christopher Nolan set of Batman films, the Batman universe feels almost too dark to have a boy wonder running around. This version of Batman tackles horrifying serial killers and goes through intense internal trauma. So the idea of him having a bright and colorful boy wonder really seemed odd to me. But if you look at the natural progression of Batman in this universe, then him going out and finding a Robin to help create this own little family makes perfect sense for his progression in the story. If he can't trust the Wayne family, then maybe he should go off and create the Bat family. Sure, Robin might be bright and colorful, but he doesn't necessarily have to be so kid-friendly in this universe. And to help Robin not be so childlike, as we've seen in previous iterations of the character, then I think the perfect person who should take up the mantle of Robin in this universe is Jason Todd. Sure, Dick Grayson may technically be the first Robin in the comics, but I think Jason Todd actually fits a hell of a lot better in this universe as Robin. In the more recent version of his comic book origin, Jason Todd was an orphan in the streets of Gotham. He had a troubled childhood and was no stranger to the tough life of a Gotham City criminal. Hell, Batman first met him after Todd tried to steal the tires off of the Batmobile. So in the Batman sequel, I think that Bruce Wayne meeting and taking in Jason Todd would be a perfect progression in his family story. In my opinion, a gritty and tough Robin for a gritty and tough Gotham City makes way more sense for this world than a bright and colorful acrobat like Dick Grayson. And, of course, with both Robin and Batman being these dark and brooding characters, it gives them both room to slowly grow into a more lighthearted duo. But that's enough about Robin, because now I want to turn your attention from Batman's partners to Batman's massive rogues gallery of villains. However, before I get to the enemies that I want to see in the next movie, I think I should talk about the massive clown-shaped elephant in the room. So as we know, based on the deleted scene that was recently released, the Joker is in this universe. He's already a prisoner at Arkham Asylum, and he's already established as a foe that Batman has dealt with in the past. But, and this may be a bit controversial, I don't really want to see Joker in the next movie. Sure, the Joker is cool, sure, he's a fascinating villain, but we've gotten, and I shit you not, 4 separate portrayals of this character in the last 15 years on screen. He's awesome, don't get me wrong, he's one of my favorite comic book characters of all time, but we've seen Joker so many times recently, and I'm starting to get a little tired of him. And as much as I love Joker, I would just prefer it if we get at least one more movie without the Clown Prince of Crime. But, okay, if not the Joker, then who exactly do I want to see face off against the Dark Knight in his next movie? Well, perhaps the most obvious first choice for a villain other than the Joker would be the silent surgeon, Hush. Now, I'll admit that idea is not that original for me to start with. I mean, no disrespect here, but when you have MatPat of all people suggesting the inclusion of this guy, you know that Hush is a pretty obvious choice. But nobody said that that was necessarily a bad idea. After all, Hush is the perfect enemy for this version of Batman. Hush is a master manipulator and intelligent strategist, and Batman in this universe is seen more as an investigator and analyst. We've seen basically every other version of Batman on film as more of a fighter, but this version of Batman is obviously worthy of being the world's greatest detective, and watching him take on a masterful plan created by the mysterious Hush could be so exciting. And all of this goes without mentioning the personal connection between Hush and Batman. Since, of course, Hush, aka the rich Thomas Elliot, was childhood friends with Bruce Wayne. But that was before Wayne's father saved Elliot's mother after he secretly tried to kill her for her money. So, the two characters do feel very similar and connected, both as normal civilians and as masked creatures of the darkness. So like I said, it's clear that Hush would be a great villain for this universe, but that would be a bit obvious. So, how about we move on to someone who I think could really play with the investigative nature of this version of the Batman, with the Mad Hatter. Obsessed with the Alice in Wonderland story, Jervis Tetch is an intelligent scientist who creates mind control devices to manipulate his victims. Now, on the surface, you might be thinking that this character is a very silly villain for Batman. And I mean, you're not wrong. But I think that Jervis Tetch would be a great challenge for Batman to overcome in our next movie. Like I said, Batman is a detective who hunts down the criminals of Gotham City. Well, how exactly can you take on the predators of crime when they are in fact being manipulated into doing that crime? After all, if the story has Mad Hatter manipulating the minds of his victims to commit crimes for him, then Batman will have a very difficult time trying to track him down. Mad Hatter doesn't even have to be near the crime scene in order for him to steal or kill his next victim. All he has to do is manipulate Jimothy Buttsniff to do the crime for him, and Mad Hatter gets off scot-free. So not only does Mad Hatter feel like a good fit for a Batman detective story, but I do also believe that he serves another function in the grander scheme of this universe. With the Mad Hatter being a bit, shall we say, cartoony in his aesthetic and presentation, I think he can be a way to introduce the more wacky characters in Batman's rogues gallery. After all, Batman has dealt with characters like crocodile men and moldable clay-like monsters that may feel a bit odd in this more realistic world. Even movies like Batman Begins barely scratches the surface of his more wackier concepts and villains. Ra's al Ghul, a man whose main trait is that he uses a Lazarus pit, is only presented as a regular man who leads the League of Shadows. He isn't really shown to have any rejuvenating powers. Perhaps the idea of a zombie leader of a clan of ninjas was a bit too much for this real-world Gotham that was presented in Batman Begins. But in the Batman, I think that this hyper-serious version of Gotham City could slowly be introduced to the more wacky side of his comic book origins. And Mad Hatter feels like a perfect introduction to that style of a cartoony and comic booky world, in my opinion. However, if you want to just completely go and jump into that cartoony style, then perhaps the next villain for this version of Batman should be Clayface. Clayface is well, a guy made of clay. Not too much more to say there. He has the power of transformation, turning himself into people or objects at a moment's notice. He could have the shape of a sharp sword, a heavy boulder, or even Jimothy Buttsniff. And with this power of transformation comes an unlimited amount of possibilities. We could see Clayface miraculously transform into a police officer to help steer the police away from his crimes, a billionaire who he can steal money from, or even a district attorney with a lot of political power in Gotham City. Clayface is even the perfect character for a great plot twist if written that way, which is exactly what we saw at the end of Batman Arkham City. But, like I said, Clayface does feel a little silly for this universe. However, if they do it right, then I can't see why this once actor turned monster couldn't be slotted into this world. And of course, those aren't the only villains that I would love to see take on the Pattinson Batman. There's an entire rogues gallery of Batman villains ready to be explored that could honestly take up 4, 5, maybe even 6 movies on their own. You could have the slow burn story with Harvey Dent being introduced in the Batman 2 before eventually making his way into the 3rd movie as Two-Face. You could have the mysterious Court of Owls masterminding a huge plot for multiple movies, taking on the Batman one villain at a time. You have so many different Batman villains that could fit perfectly in this dark and noir type universe. Sure, maybe some of Batman's rogues gallery might not fit here, but this version of Batman is unlike anything we've seen before on screen. So you could take this young and brooding version of Batman in so many different ways that I think would be great. But overall, I hope that they keep the core aspects of this version of Batman the same. As much as I love Michael Keaton and Christian Bale's versions of this character, I will say that I do love a good old-fashioned mystery. And Robert Pattinson's Batman, way more than his predecessors, really does feel as though he deserves the title of world's greatest detective. I just hope that this version of the character doesn't solely rely on his fists, gadgets, and bat nipples to get the job done. But hopefully, the sequel will continue to show the intelligence that I have grown to love in this version of the Batman. Thank you all so much for watching this video on the Batman. What would you guys like to see in the sequel of this incredible movie? And what other ideas do you have for the future of this franchise? Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. But, until next time, have a good day. Bye-bye.